So, as a rule, I hate inspirational political speeches. And yet, there's always an exception, isn't there? So obviously, this is going to be an inspirational political speech of sorts. But I will open with, I think, the fundamental challenge we have as people. We are motivated by so many things. We're motivated by greed. We're motivated by fear. We're motivated by hope. We're motivated occasionally by love. Now, as a species, we're about 120,000 years old. And for the last 12,000, we have been an agricultural species. We started to farm. I think that's important because until we started farming, we were just family tribes. There was no scaling. There was limited cooperation beyond the bond of family, beyond the bond of love. Now, that's very nice in terms of course, that's valuable, but it's not great for advancing. Without scale, we are just us. With scale, we become something entirely different. Now, when we started farming, when we went beyond the first steps of subsistence farming, we started to allow people to do something other than try to get food, to do something other than basic survival. And that led to our villages, our towns, our cities, and now all this world around us. The success story of humanity is our collaboration. But our collaboration is not organic. We haven't started working together because collaboration is in our nature per se. Survival is, greed is. However, if we want to do more with our time, collaboration is essential. And we've built all kinds of social contracts to make collaboration happen. If you look at a small group of people, let's say a small town like Erfurt, you can get together and maybe you can know each other and you can trust each other. But if you look at a large group of people, let's say Germany, you can't trust most people. You have no idea where they come from, who they are. Then if you look at a continent, then if you look at a planet, there is no trust. What allows us to collaborate at scale are contracts, social contracts, legal contracts, constructs like that, tools like that, designed to accomplish one interesting phenomenon: trust between parties who don't know each other and have no reason to trust each other organically. Working out large-scale collaboration, working out the social and legal contracts that allowed us to scale has accomplished wonderful things, including open source. Fundamentally, open source is about parties who don't know or trust each other collaborating on shared platforms. Everyone has their own motive, often a selfish motive, and that's fine. Because of the constructs around it, because of the mechanisms like licenses to create trust, we're able to collaborate on those platforms. Now, my speech took a slightly different direction yesterday in Berlin Hauptbahnhof when my suitcase was stolen and all my clothes and cameras and all of that is gone. This is C&A Erfurt, thank you very much. Which actually I thought was very useful for my keynote. Expensive, but useful. Collaboration is imperfect, and social contracts are imperfect. Everything is imperfect. Some people will misbehave, some people will make mistakes, some people will challenge things. When it comes to what we're doing in open source, what we're actually doing in this room is business process management, product delivery to market, cost reduction, innovation increase. And some of our collaboration is going really, really well these days. We've seen incredible strides in areas like software bill of materials, automation, having a common understanding of the expectations in the supply chain. If I may choose my own project, OpenChain, I would point out that things like having ISO standards for license compliance has been useful. We've increased our efficiency. And yet, open source is not static and software is not static, and we're facing all types of different challenges. One type of challenge is in metaphor land, similar to my suitcase being stolen. Some parties are looking at our field of open source and attempting to reinvent how licensing works, reinvent how shared platforms are available. Suddenly, people feel disenfranchised and uncomfortable and upset. Some parties are saying certain things are open source, and other parties are saying, no, they're not. That's not the contract we had. That's not the social understanding. There are other tensions too. AI has been mentioned in this conference a lot. It's very interesting. It's great, but it will annihilate most programming jobs. We're done when machines can write code, and they're nearly there. Kind of. And that's where, going back 12,000 years and drawing big lines, I'm a political scientist. That's where I think moments of change and evolution are always challenging. Sometimes we're too optimistic, and sometimes we're too pessimistic. Something like AI will transform programming forever. We won't have people writing code. We will have people writing recipes for AI to deliver code and double checking it. When it comes to things like what is open source in the future, will we have models where when you have a certain amount of users, you move from an open contract into a proprietary contract? I don't know. Actually, it doesn't matter much, which might seem counterintuitive. As long as we have a social contract, as long as we have something that works for the majority of people, as long as we're making great products and solutions to market, as long as we can adapt, actually it's fine. The reason we got to open source is because we did other things first. The proprietary software model was great while it lasted for a small number of participants making relatively simple code. We got to open source because we had a lot of participants and extremely complex code. It was very hard and expensive to make platforms. All through human history, disruption has been one of the keys to innovation. The party looking at a carriage and saying, that's enough, don't move forward, besides we should only ever have carriages, is fighting the tide of the automobile and will fail. Presumably, going back a little further than 12,000 years, there was someone who looked at the wheel and said, no, absolutely not. We should keep dragging things. That's fine. We're at another inflection point. A few years ago, open source was a bit dodgy, a bit uncertain. It wasn't necessarily great for business strategy makers to understand, but engineers liked it. Then open source now is the dominant way of making software, perhaps more than 90%. Next, who knows? We'll have new licenses that will be open source-ish. We'll have machines writing code, and we'll probably have completely left field stuff happening. The most important point, I think, is the simplest point, and this is where all of the talks in this room have been touching on the same fundamental concept, and I'd like to tie a ribbon about it. We're here for a specific purpose. We want things like open source in our businesses. We want them there because it delivers efficiencies we recognize. In other words, in this room, we have a social contract for being here. We have a relatively shared motivation and a relatively shared vision with some differences at the edges. Some people know an awful lot. Some people are new. All people have the same fundamental drive to play in this field. If we continue with the idea of collaborating, we can equally do so whether we agree perfectly or not, whether we are the most experienced and advanced person in the room or not. The heartening thing for me is that events like this are occurring all around the world, though honestly, BitKom is a really exceptional jewel. Agendas like today, where we see major companies like Mercedes and Siemens take the stage and describe how they've gone from using open source into having extremely refined process management for open source, is exceptional. Having people from companies like Deutsche Bank, having people from law firms like JBB Law, Till is here somewhere. Where's Till? There you are, first guy to litigate on the GPL, first guy to prove open source licenses will work in a court of law. Having all of those people in a room, having everyone work together, BitKom, I must give huge credit to Frank here and all the people behind BitKom for succeeding in that. Wonderful agenda, wonderful network. But all around the world, we're seeing events like this. I just did a China tour. I had some really good talks in Shanghai, Beijing, and in Shenzhen. I've just been in Spain. I was in Korea. I was everywhere. I've been traveling since February. My family doesn't recognize me anymore. All around the world, we have people who have a very similar social contract to this room. And despite the geopolitical differences that have happened to us, hello Russia, we have a shared vision of doing things together and building incredible solutions in the digital sphere. This wave of digital transformation will continue in slightly unpredictable ways, but it's the people in this room at the forefront that will be both first informed and in a position to inform others of what's coming. I hope that no one loses sight of the big picture. I hope no one loses sight of the fact that this type of collaboration is similar to the collaboration we had when we decided to stop surviving on scrabbling for food and build scale so we could have specialists in areas like being blacksmiths or quantum physicists. I hope that no one forgets that business benefits from collaboration. I hope no one forgets, though, that businesses must be effective and efficient. We mustn't become lost in dogma. We mustn't become lost in looking at the past. We have to adapt. I fear slightly for the European Union. I'm from Ireland. I know I sound American, but I'm not one of them. I fear slightly for us in Europe. As I travel the world, I see, particularly in Asia, a type of rapid innovation and adjustment that I don't see as prevalent in Europe. Germany has been a bit of a bright spark recently. I mean, we saw it on the stage today. It's been phenomenal. But I'm worried that as an old continent and old civilizations, we have become somewhat complacent in our space. In China, they talk about 996. All right, yeah, working 9 a.m. until 9 p.m. 6 days a week, which is fairly normal in companies like Huawei. And the problem is that we're not smarter than the people 8,000 kilometers to our left. They just are working more and they're surpassing us in many ways. I'm sure you've seen the latest cell phones out of China, the latest cars, the latest planes. I hope that, this is a selfish hope, I hope that beyond global collaboration, that we can ensure that the collaboration nearby that helps the people working in cities like Stuttgart, working in cities like Dublin, have jobs. And apart from the broader collaboration, I hope that the people in this room will work very hard to make sure that German companies continue to be at the forefront. in areas like digital transformation. I'm heartened by what we saw today. I feel like, yes, I haven't seen anywhere in the world better approaches to business process management, to sustainable approaches to digital technology than I saw in this room. But let's not get complacent about that. Let's make sure that this conference continues to accelerate the field. And this conference has a strong business focus. We mustn't forget that there are other domains, like we mustn't become detached from the engineering experts. So let's also make sure we check out conferences like FOSS Backstage and make sure that we have a look in at the conferences that might occur in places like Sweden, such as FOSS North. And finally, and this is my ending note, I mentioned my selfish desire for the European Union to continue to maintain excellence in quality and innovation. But we're not going to be an island in this, and our competitors are clear. We're competing with places like China. And the rational solution to this is go and collaborate with them. We should have more people from companies like Huawei or Shanghai Automotive coming to our events here in Europe to tell us how they are innovating. The fact that, example, Huawei contributed a massive amount to AI software bill of materials because they've been working on it for many years indicates how far ahead these companies can be in some domains. I hope we can collaborate with our competitors around the world and learn from them, as well as teaching them. And I think if we manage to do that, have healthy competition, to know that we are up against each other on economic challenges, but sharing the same fundamental challenge of building the future, that's really the spirit of open source, isn't it? And that's where the open source people, us, are best positioned perhaps to be a good example around the world. Let me give you an example of a bad example before I go. Recently there were some very loud voices, let's keep them anonymous and call them the Americans, who said, we need to cut China off from extreme ultraviolet lithography and managed to make sure that ASML would no longer export machines for that very tiny microchip process. Guess what? 2 weeks ago, Chinese companies announced they're now building 7-nanometer chips. They've built their own extreme ultraviolet lithography machines, which is both obvious and terribly wasteful. Imagine all of the re-engineering hours that went into something that we've already created. And honestly, we should just be happy to sell to each other. It's not a weapon. That is the counterexample to efficient collaboration. That's the friction and the nonsense that helps prevent us getting great products to market, helps prevent us scaling and truly innovating. Identifying stuff like that and recognizing it, while recognizing occasionally it's inevitable, is part of our challenge. And as I said, providing a counterexample is part of our obligation, our responsibility. In the next few months, we'll see a series of events occurring in Japan and China that will indicate where these geographies are going. You're all welcome to attend them. And if you want more details about those events, and more generally about sustainable business process management in open source, you can start tomorrow. Marcel and his team at PwC are hosting OpenChain here in Erfurt. We start at 10:30 and we continue until 4 p.m. We'll be deep diving ISO standards for compliance, security, and we'll be having a look at sustainability in the SBOM field. A little different to this event. We'll be going more of a deep dive. And I will take special time tomorrow to explain the events around the world and the individual individuals around the world that you might benefit from speaking to. With that, I shall end. And Frank, am I allowed to make cynical jokes? Just checking. I'm Irish, okay? Bear with me. You know, I'm very optimistic about where we're going. But my personal opinion, this isn't really the joke yet, this is the serious bit, is that humans are basically idiots. And we're very smart idiots, but we've been idiots. And we did start collaborating in the final 10% of our species' existence. But because we're idiots, we probably started by accident and then we scaled. I'm hoping that even though we are idiots and machines are now surpassing us, there is something left for us to contribute. And I think what is left is not repetitive tasks or being angry little apes. I think what is left is the fact that we can see patterns and we look at the stars and we dream. And not just in abstract dreams, we look at the stars and think, what if we could go there? And then we build a rocket. I believe we have a lot to contribute still, despite being our own worst enemy and have almost practically unraveled the planet as a livable space for ourselves. Despite those things, I'm fairly optimistic. And I'm personally at your disposal if I can ever help network you and if I can ever help connect you to parties that can help you individually with your business goals. Finally, I just want to say thank you to everyone for your tolerance in listening to me ramble at the end of this long day. And thank you to the team. And huge credit to everyone in this room who spoke and everyone in this room who asked questions in networking. I was opening this conference last year and I was very impressed. But this conference has truly evolved remarkably in this year. And that's no easy task. Somewhat surprisingly, given that this country is falling apart so much, my luggage is stolen in your main train stations. Despite that, apart from that, Germany is really doing amazing things in digital transformation. And I owe huge credit to the people in this room for making that happen. And the fact that OpenChain was cited so much in this event indicates your leadership. And that's something genuinely to be proud of. People around the world are watching what happens here and they're following. Not just because of economics, but because it's obviously better. So huge hand, not for me, but for yourselves.